40 Days for Life has seen some amazing things happen over the past 5 or 6 years. Has it been that long? Oh, gosh. And one of the things that happens is that abortion facilities close down. Praise God. And that's a very great and wonderful thing. And right here in the Twin Cities, we had a major hospital, inner city hospital that has been doing abortions since 1976, closed its abortion facility a little more than a year ago because of our 40 Days for Life campaigns out there. Now, here's my apology. In a lot of these situations, you and David have been invited to the celebration after the abortion facility closed, and I never invited you guys to that when we did it here. So I am sorry we didn't do that. Now, here's the other side of it. You guys just learned that the abortion facility in Texas, it's not in College Station. Is it actually there? Okay. That abortion facility that the Coalition for Life was created to deal with, which birthed 40 Days for Life, which is the reason you've been doing 40 Days for Life, which has now grown into the largest international pro-life movement we've ever seen, is closing. It's closing. It's closing. And having experienced the joy of knowing what it's like after laboring for years and years and years to try and get our abortion facility to close, the joy of seeing that one close, I can't even imagine what the joy is for you and for David and for all the other team that has worked so hard to see this one close. God bless you guys. That's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And I apologize so that I can invite myself to your celebration when you have it. I'd like to be there, so let me know when you guys are going to do it. Okay, with no further ado, I'd like to invite Shawn Carney with 40 Days for Life to come up and share.
That was a great introduction. I wasn't invited to come to the closing here in Minnesota, but it was December 7th is the last day when they announced that they were not going to do abortions, and so December in Minnesota is a lot different. You are all invited on September 7th. This is not public yet. September 7th, we will have a celebration in College Station, Texas, for the closure of that Planned Parenthood abortion facility, which announced last Thursday that they would be closing. It was just 2 or 3 minutes after the Huffington Post released the news story that I, ironically, was told that this facility where I first started going out and praying in front of as right after my high school year. I was 18 years old when I first went out there in 2001. And I was told, ironically, by the former director of that facility, Abby Johnson, that it was closing its doors. And then I had the joy to call David B. Wright and let him know, and the celebration began. And that really is why so many of you traveled so far from Vermont and Dallas, Texas, and Iowa. See how many whoops we can get. That Nebraska. I know, and I was just there, and I don't want to get in trouble with you. You have a lot of enemies, but the right kind. That's why we're in this room. That's why we traveled, is to see local abortion facilities close. And abortion facilities close through sidewalk counseling. That's what closed the College Station, Texas Planned Parenthood, is sidewalk counseling day in and day out. And whether you've been here the last few years at this conference, or whether this is the first time and you got drug into this because you didn't have the courage to say no to a pro-life event, it's how many people get involved. Whatever the reason is, you need to be open to taking what you get in the next few days, going to an abortion facility, and having the most urgent conversation in America. Talking to a woman who is going in to make the worst decision of her life that will end the life of the unrepeatable little boy or little girl that is growing inside of her. I remember taking a donor one time to an abortion facility. This person, I was running a local group, the Coalition for Life, and this person really had no idea what we did, but just sent money. This is the heart of the pro-life movement. people that just are against abortion and send money. And I remember this was a very prominent businessman, and he went out and he was outside of the Planned Parenthood. He didn't want to go close to it. He was very nervous his first time out, as so many are. And so we stood across the street, and he noticed we had 2 or 3 sidewalk counselors in front of this Planned Parenthood. And this was a businessman from Houston and very well established. And he asked me what those people were doing who were reaching out to these women going in. And I gave him the 30-second explanation of what sidewalk counseling is. And his jaw just dropped and said, I know CEOs that wouldn't have a tenth of the confidence that those people have to do that. And these people are running companies, and the people across the street are engaging in a 15 or 20-second conversation. That is what it takes to help save the life of a baby, to be Christ's hands, to be his feet, and to have the courage to overcome that natural fear. And I hope that many of you who have been sidewalk counseling for years before I was even born, to the ones who are considering becoming a sidewalk counselor, take courage from the next few days, go back and try to end abortion at the most important of all levels, the local level. Now, this is the most difficult thing we can do in the pro-life movement. The strongest voices we have in the pro-life movement are post-abortive women. I had the privilege of hearing 5 Silent No More awareness women come to Texas A&M University when I was in college, and hearing their testimonies really encouraged me to become a sidewalk counselor. I had dated a sidewalk counselor and eventually married a sidewalk counselor, and now have 4 beautiful children, 4 future sidewalk counselors. And yeah. And yet it was post-abortive women who really spoke to me as a young, clueless 20-year-old who was involved in the movement but didn't really understand the gravity of what it is that we're fighting. And when I heard those women, I got over it and went through the training and became a sidewalk counselor, never being half as good as my wife, of course. But we have to keep perspective in this movement. And last year, I had the joy of being able to speak in England. 40 Days for Life has exploded throughout that country. And our local leader, Robert Cahoon, has done a phenomenal job and gotten a lot of horrible media coverage, but still good media coverage from the BBC and The Guardian. And so he had an event, and I went over and spoke at it. My daughter, Bridget, who is 7 years old, my oldest, she was very concerned. She told me that, she said, Daddy, I know you're going to England, and in England, they speak proper English. And you're from Texas. I said, so are you. And you don't know how to speak English. And it was great when I was there. I did have a British professor come up to me afterwards and say a few words. And I said, you know, when I travel throughout the United States, a lot of people tell me that I don't really sound like I'm from Texas. And the British have a great gift of belittling those in their presence without those realizing it. And this is why the Irish are so good at it. The English taught them. And I said, you know, a lot of people don't think I have an accent. And he said, really, a lot of people would be very, very wrong. And for the momentum that the Brits have going in the pro-life movement, it is very humbling and sobering to see the reality of abortion in that country. London, a city of 10 million people, has 1 pregnancy center. And they have about 5 helpers that serve as the only sidewalk counselors in the entire country. 1 pregnancy center in a city of 10 million people. How blessed are we in the United States of America to where now in most parts of the country, pregnancy resource centers outnumber abortion providers 6 to 1, 7 to 1 in some areas. And this is what causes a lot of pressure to be put on sidewalk counselors in our nation, because we have places to send these women. They simply have to have the opportunity to turn around at the very last moment. And I've had so many post-abortive women say, you know, I probably would have told the sidewalk counselor to get lost, or I would have blown her off or blown him off. But I at least wanted the opportunity to have that last chance at turning around, but there was no one there in front of that facility when I had my abortions 10, 15, 20 years ago. A few years ago, we had a case in Texas where a young couple, an unmarried couple, found out that they were pregnant. And they decided not to have an abortion, but as the pregnancy went on, the girlfriend decided she did want to have an abortion, but it was too late. And this was before, obviously, the legislation passed 2 weeks ago. And so she convinced her boyfriend to jump on her stomach to kill the baby. And the boyfriend consented to do this. And in her living room, she delivered not one dead child, but 2 dead babies on the carpet of her den. The boyfriend went to prison for the rest of his life for double homicide, 2 life sentences to prison. And in the courtroom, the mom was on the front row of the courtroom screaming, "Take me to jail too. Take me to jail too." Now, what's telling about this tragedy is that Planned Parenthood's reaction in the media was that it was a shame that this couple did not know all of their options, which for this audience, I don't have to translate, but I will. We could have killed her children for her. The tragedy was not these 2 dead children on the carpet. The tragedy was not this mom who witnessed this whole thing and went through excruciating pain and now somehow has to pick up the pieces of her life and move forward from this horrific event. And it was not this young man, as stupid as he was, who's now going to jail for the rest of his life. That was not the tragedy. The tragedy for Planned Parenthood was that they did not have an abortion. This marriage that we've seen of abortion and healthcare, abortion as a solution, abortion as a good. As graphic and as miserable as it is, Planned Parenthood refuses to look at the reality of what they are doing. And when they do look at it, they are very honest about it. That couple did not know all of their options. These are the horrific stories that at times when we want to throw our hands up in the air and we look at our culture, and there are so many fronts, whether it's the Christian front, the Catholic front, the healthcare battle, marriage. There are so many things that are not going well in our culture. But we have a lot going for us in the pro-life movement at the local level. But we have to show up. We have to reach couples like that. We have to go to where the abortions are actually done and offer that last sign of hope. Be that last sign of hope before the abortion for the baby, and certainly the first sign of mercy to the woman as she comes out after her abortion, because there is no follow-up appointment in the abortion industry. They are left to us, and it's our Christian responsibility to take them, to love them, and to give them a future and a hope. Abortion, I believe, will end in our nation. It is ending because of rooms just like this. And in order to keep perspective of how brutal this is, we often look at history. And the last major Holocaust we had was not that far removed. It's removed from our consciousness now. So many young people have no idea. We are losing, I think, 1,600 World War II veterans a day, unfortunately. And we are forgetting where we came from, so we don't know where we are going, and that leaves a very dangerous path forward. On October 16th, 1946, at Nuremberg, there was one hanging that was going to take place, and everybody was sort of paying attention because this is when Hans Frank was going to be hung. And Hans Frank was one of 2 Nazis who claimed to have a conversion. He was Catholic, he left his faith, obviously, joined the Nazis, and in prison found God again. And so he claimed to come back to his faith. And he was given one last sentence before he was put to death. He was the Governor General of Poland during the Holocaust, a brutal person. And he was responsible for Auschwitz. And so right before he was hung, his last sentence is now the first sentence to a classic book that all pro-lifers should read, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And his last quote was, 1,000 years will have passed, and the guilt of Germany will not have been wiped away. This is a man that just 4 years earlier told his cabinet to have no pity in their hearts because they were about to annihilate every Jew in Poland. The human heart is extremely frail. It is capable of great evil, and it is capable of great sanctity. And on the front lines of our battle, which does not come to us with Nazis and with guns and with tanks, but moral relativism and an irrational tolerance that says you can do whatever you want to whomever you want if you so will it. Our culture war is nice. And niceness is the most dangerous thing in our world today because we all want to be nice. We don't want to love or sacrifice or forgive. We would rather be nice. That's why nearly 35 women have abortions every single day, because so few people are willing to step up in the gap and offer that loving alternative, except for sidewalk counselors. You are on the epitome of the front lines because you represent truth at a time when most people have given up on anything being true, and you offer hope at a time when despair seems like the only solution as they go in to the abortion facility. And unlike war, this really is about hearts and minds. It's not a cliche. One heart and one mind at a time. And that's exactly what you see in sidewalk counseling. That's exactly what we've seen through 40 Days for Life. We never imagined that a campaign that lasts 40 days of prayer and fasting, 40 days of peaceful vigil outside of a local abortion facility, we never imagined it would go from one community in Texas to a strange place like Minnesota or Green Bay, Wisconsin, or Seattle, Washington. It's now gone to 19 different countries. We've seen 40 Days for Life happen in Moscow, Russia, where you have more rights in the public right-of-way than you do in Paris, France. We've seen it go to England, Ireland, Australia. The Irish take this campaign very seriously, fasting off nothing but Guinness for 40 straight days. Throughout the country, as you have seen, and we have many 40 Days for Life leaders in the room, we have the Scheidlers who have had their fair share of persecution over the years. This is a tough thing to sign up for. When you go to the front lines, there are people that support you, and there are a lot of people that don't support you. And I remember the first time I went out to pray at an abortion facility, I did not want to do it. My then girlfriend, now wife, asked me to go, told me to go, and I went, and it had an amazing impact on me because, like many of you, I had that experience of seeing that this is not something that is tucked away on the bench of the Supreme Court or in Washington, D.C. This happens in our neighborhoods. This happens where we live, to the people who we know and love and are supposed to support. And so it had a tremendous impact on me. And I'll never forget seeing the first woman that I ever saw have an abortion, and she was leaving, and our eyes kind of locked, and she was my age, 18, 19 years old at the time, and everything she was going in there for was a lie. The relief that is promised in exchange for $450 for 15-minute surgery was nowhere to be found. There was no relief. It was very much, yes, the end of the unborn child's life inside of her, but very much the beginning of hopefully a road to hope and to healing. But what you quickly discover when you're out there is that it's so easy to get mad. It's easy to get ticked off. It's easy to get frustrated because it may be hot. It was always hot where we are. It's probably cold here. It was cold at your kickoff. But you were at home. I know you were sick. I'm teasing. It was cold in late September in St. Paul, Minnesota. But it's so easy to get frustrated out on the sidewalks. It's a very frustrating environment, and there is so much evil there because the devil wants to get every single woman in there. He wants to discourage them afterwards, and he wants to discourage you. He wants to tell you you're doing no good and you're wasting no time, or he wants to turn you against them. And I always thought of a great Fulton Sheen quote before we would go out and we would go to the abortion facilities, because right after I had an experience with a young man who was leaving after paying for his girlfriend to have an abortion. I was holding a sign, and it had the number of abortions that had happened in our community. It was 3,922 at the time. And I was holding that sign, and the young guy, my age, pulled out, and with his girlfriend crying in the front seat of the car, he looked at me and rolled down the window and said, "Hey, why don't you go on ahead and add another number onto that sign? We're done here." And I'm from East Texas, and so there are East Texas reactions to that where you just kind of never see the guy ever again, you know? And I remember becoming so mad. It's probably the maddest I've ever been at an abortion facility. And I didn't do anything. There was nothing to say. I could just only look at him. And I remember this Fulton Sheen quote, and it really speaks to the mentality that we have to have, because it's a great responsibility being out there praying or being a sidewalk counselor, and we'll be judged on how we conduct ourselves out there because we are in such an important position. God has put us there for a reason, and we represent him. Fulton Sheen says, "We must forgive others, for on no other condition will our own sins be forgiven." It is as simple as that. There can be and there will be no mercy toward us unless we ourselves are merciful. The real test of the Christian, then, is not how much he loves his friends, but how much he loves his enemies. And how difficult is that when you are in the midst of dealing with death escorts and Planned Parenthood workers and people driving in telling you to get lost, people driving by telling you to get a life. Keeping our composure and keeping the heart of Christ is what has closed so many abortion facilities across the country. It is what has sparked so much pro-life activism across America. There's no one on the streets actively marching for abortion. The activist section of the pro-abortion movement is dead, in my opinion. Even when you see a large counter-protest, and I was in Austin for all the fiasco stuff 2 weeks ago, and they just do not have the endurance that we have because they don't have God. They are a godless movement. And I know you saw the pictures on the internet, and those were the ones that they were willing to put on the internet. The rally we had with Mike Huckabee that night, was the fruits and nuts really came out after that. But none of the words exchanged, none of the hostility had anything to do with our position on abortion. It had everything to do with the fact that we were Christian. Christ is still the most controversial figure in human history, and he always will be, because he rose from the dead. And that's what our faith in abortion ending stands on, is the resurrection. We cannot run out and save the world. If we try, we're going to last about 5 or 10 minutes. And this movement will chew you up and spit you out. And you'll get your pro-life t-shirt and walk away going, "I'm done with that." But if it's rooted in prayer, if we truly are, as Mother Teresa says, the hands and feet of Christ out there, then this is the greatest work on earth. And no one has ever regretted going out and praying for 15 minutes or an hour or 2 hours or 5 hours on a Saturday or a Tuesday or whenever it is. No one ever regrets going out there. Getting out there can be so hard. Don't you notice you have all of these things scheduled, and then something happens, you find out they're doing abortions, or you need more people out there? It's so hard to get out there, but it is time never wasted, because human life is at stake. We had one woman who was the daughter of a well-known black preacher in Houston, and she drove to Bryan to have an abortion. And we sidewalk counseled her right outside on the sidewalk, and she said, I can't tell my parents, it'll embarrass my father. I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna have an abortion. And she was very determined, and all we could do is convince her to ask for the ultrasound at that facility. And at the time, Abby was the director there. They would charge you for the ultrasound, $200. Then after the ultrasound, they would say, well, since you paid the $200 for the ultrasound, we will apply that to the cost of the abortion, so it's like getting a discount. And so they did this to this woman, but something happened during the ultrasound. She was going in numb. She promised us that she would ask to see it, but when she saw it, she realized that there was not one baby, but there were two babies in the womb. And all she could think about was one word: twins. Twins is a powerful word. We always have a positive reaction when somebody's having twins. As contraceptive of a mentality as we have in our culture, we're still in love with twins. People, I know. You see how perfect I set that up for you? We still perk up when we hear twins. And that's what matters. And that mom, obviously, it hit her. She was a mother of two twins, and she gave birth to two beautiful baby boys, told her dad, and her dad was ecstatic. And he wasn't embarrassed, and they were very honest about what had happened, and ended up being a huge blessing to that family. And we asked her in a private conversation, a follow-up question. One of our sidewalk counselors reached out to her, and they said, you know, we're just so happy for you, and would you like to join us out on the sidewalk? And she did. And when we asked her why she decided to go out and to pray for the other women who were going in just as she had gone in, she said, because if it weren't for the sidewalk counselors, my two boys would be dead. And she just said it just like that. And it's true. It's true. If they had not mentioned to get an ultrasound, her children would be dead. And that's the perspective that we have to have. We live in a nation that is losing its sense of identity. We've lost 56 million children in our history. And that number makes you become overwhelmed as we're in the midst of the 40th year of abortion. But we can't do anything for those 56 million. That is a large number. It's overwhelming. But we can do something for the 30 or the 40 or the 50 that are going to be aborted in our communities this week or next Saturday. We can do something about that. We can't do it on our own, but we can pray, we can fast, we can show up, and God does work miracles when we do that. This is the greatest time in history to live, because if you do something small, if you do something simple, it shines really bright in a culture that is lost, in a culture that does not know where it came from or where it's going. And no one questions why you're out there. You know, you can go out and you can pray in front of a Chick-fil-A because you want to save the chickens. And I don't know what they do to the chickens, but whatever it is delicious. And that business at that Chick-fil-A is going to go down. If you're out there praying for an end to Chick-fil-A, you're going to be a nut, and people are going to say all sorts of things to you. But their business will get hurt over time if you do it long enough. Well, nobody wonders why we're out at Planned Parenthood or some other abortion facility, because in its nature, it's controversial. And the only thing people really want is to not be reminded how controversial it is and not be reminded of what goes on inside. And when you're there, you remind the community, you remind the workers, and you also are there to remind the women that they do not have to go in there. You know, we've seen 38 abortion facilities following a 40 Days for Life campaign or during a 40 Days for Life campaign closed their doors. Some of them, a lot of those are facilities that had little or no opposition for years. And so the doctor decided he's closing shop, not relocating, but just completely going out of business because it hurt their numbers so much. And I could never really relate to that because the facility that I prayed at for so long and had the joy of serving as the director of the Coalition for Life for 6 years in College Station, our whole goal was to close that facility. But whenever I would hear of regions, stop doing abortions or some other facility, I could just hear the joy in the person's voice, and it was something I couldn't relate to. I longed to see that day. We had babies saved, and we saw Abby Johnson, who walked right into my office. We saw her change of heart. But when I got that phone call, ironically, from Abby last Thursday that said, Brian is closing, when a week earlier I asked her, are they going to close Brian? And she said, no way. I said, what happened to no way? But just that utter joy of thinking about all of the people, college students, veterans, men, women, teachers, everybody who went out there when they could be doing so many other things and prayed for an hour or sidewalk counseled and went out week after week after week. And that facility is closing and leaving forever. That's a huge victory, and it's a victory we need to see in every single city in America, because I do think that this is the beginning of the end of abortion. We have seen one of the people that had the joy of praying outside of that Bryan facility was a young woman named Susie Calvey. She was our best sidewalk counselor. She was feisty. She could get around any objection. She was kind of a smart aleck. She had all the talent and that you needed in a solid, down-to-earth, kind of frisky sidewalk counselor. And Susie Planned Parenthood hated her. She was just picking people off one by one, no matter what. And the guys, they didn't know what to do. The boyfriends were scared of her. And she was always out there. We had to tell her she had to quit cutting class to go sidewalk counsel. Although I didn't mind since I was running the organization, at least the hours were filled, but still. She went out there 2 solid years, 20 years old. Susie saved 6 babies before she learned that she had a rare kind of throat cancer. And she continued to go out. She said that the doctors said that she could go out and the cancer was going to be okay. And 2 weeks later, she was told that she had 1 month to live from this cancer. And she passed away in February of 2007. And these 6 babies that she saved are really what's left of her memory. Now, the thing about Susie is that her parents really didn't know why she went out there. They knew she was involved in this pro-life stuff, but it was, she's in college, she's participating in this, who knows what it is. Maybe it's like a phase, you get involved in something. But they were often nervous about her going out and sidewalk counseling. And yet, when she passed away, we paid tribute to Susie's life, and her father courageously organized a scholarship for sidewalk counselors through Texas A&M University. It's an official scholarship through the university. And since then, he has helped fund the education of 36 sidewalk counselors at Texas A&M. And I remember so many people mourning Susie's death, and she was only 20 years old. But so many people said that she had done more with her short life to help save lives than they had done in their entire life. And that's very true. And sometimes we forget the opportunity that's before us to sidewalk counsel, or go out and pray in front of an abortion facility. This isn't something we have to do because our world's going to hell in a handbasket and we don't want to be depressed and we want to do our part. This is something that we get to do because it's necessary, it's needed, it's urgent, and there is no greater cause and there's no greater return because we are literally defending our future on the front lines. And over these next few days, keep that in mind, that the future is at stake. There's no one else who's wanting to go out and to pray in front of an abortion facility that's not in the pro-life movement. It is up to us to train ourselves, to learn, to have courage, and ultimately to pray so that we go out there and can reach out to a woman who is about to destroy her life and end the life of the child growing inside of her. There is no greater cause than the pro-life movement, but there is not a more important work within the pro-life movement than sidewalk counseling. It is the most urgent conversation. It's needed every single hour of the day because the abortion industry does abortions 24 hours in some places. And so this is our moment in history because we live in troubled times, and after 40 years, it is time to go to those places where the abortions actually happen and to offer love, to offer hope, and offer tangible resources, which we have through the pregnancy resource centers. And I couldn't be happier to be here with Father Pavone and the Scheidlers and people that I grew up in high school reading their pro-life literature. This is what we need. Many of you have been in this battle for 40 years, and Joe Scheidler is the godfather of the pro-life movement. I didn't even know he was gonna be here. When we are there, we represent those who have served in the movement, and we represent the future of our country. And we also represent hope to those who don't want to see us, who wake up in the morning and just want to walk in and either have their abortion, or who wake up in the morning and pray that God will give them a sign at the very last moment. Well, you are that sign at the very last moment. You stand for the most basic, fundamental message out of the gospel, one that we need to hear so much today. Let the children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. God bless you.